you very much, buddy. I really appreciate it. Thanks, TurboTax.
What kind of band is this?
Everybody poops sometimes.
Give us this.
Wake up, sweetness.
Your first time should be more than special.
I'm in. Savannah said. Good Lord, Gemma.
When a man and a woman, in this case, really, really love each other, what happens is they fuck.
Ooh, hello?
Oh, dang it, I lost my fish. This next word almost sounds like Quidditch. Quidditch milade u Diana Agosiagath an Fiedian
as much as I love fucking you, sweetness. We stared into each other's eyes whilst I moaned in ecstasy.
Having consumed half of the bourbon, I keep saying bourbon. You know, every time I mess up on a word, Stunt Mama just shows up.
She had her seductive smile on her lips.
I said we couldn't have sex. I didn't say anything about everything else. Ew. Happy to help. Biatch. You are the spark of light in the vastness of my night. His note, like a finality to a beautiful, breathtaking song.
Good evening. Hello. It is great to see you. It's wonderful to be back. And yeah, I'm excited. New stream space, new book. It's wonderful. I've been waiting for this moment. Look at the new space. We'll look at that. Well, thank you. So the room I am in front of me is technically a closet, which I have outfitted into a completely, well, I should 95%, 98%, somewhere around there, completely soundproofed. You can't really see it, but it's all foamed out. And then the room behind me is like my normal workspace. Thank you. I've put a lot of sweat and time and money into this room. It is my pride and joy, and I love it very much. In fact, let me switch over so you can see it. Or at least a little more of it. So there you go. That is a closer look at the room. You can see my other desk there. You can see some of the Christmas stuff I have up on the wall, or not on the wall, on the shelf. What you can't see to the right of the camera or to the left of the chair is another shelving unit which has my mini fridge, which lights up with like a nice cool blue light. And then it's also got my tea station where I made tonight's cup of tea. I've got books on there from all of our past reads. So yeah, lots of cool stuff going on. Hey, Stump Papa, good to see you. And just around the corner, right here, I also have a rope light that is currently set up for Christmas theme style music as well. So it's a really great room. I'm super pumped about it. I've already done a little bit of voice recording in this new space, so I'm excited about that. So yeah. It just feels good to be in the new spot, you know? And especially early. Like, we weren't supposed to even be in the house for another 5 days. But we're here now. Not only are we here now, but we're like, I don't know, 75% moved in, give or take. Still got a few things to figure out, but we're pretty much there. We're pretty much there. Very, very livable. All right, let me catch up. Mama House Gaming, well done on claiming first place. Super, always great to see you. Stump Mama's Mama, it is a joy to have you in the stream. I hope you're doing well. Stunt Papa, sir, thank you for being here. I don't know if our author is awake still because she is in the UK. But we are going to be reading her book tonight, Song for Someone. I have it right here. Can't wait to get into this. I've heard lots of good things. And if we do exclamation point song. Oh, failed to get the current song. Okay, so maybe I need to change the link name. Stream Elements. So confused. I'll change the link name for next time, but that is the link for our author and her work. Please check that out at your own leisure. So yes, the only thing that's sad about tonight is knowing that I have to go back to work tomorrow. Oh yes, and we have a puzzle. Why is it not on screen? That's odd. There we go. There it is. There's the puzzle. Tonight's puzzle is a lovely Christmas scene. We're going to be doing all kinds of Christmas puzzles now until the end of Christmas. This puzzle reminds me of like a tiny house village. Like if all of us streamers and friends came together and lived in a tiny house community. I imagine this is kind of what it could look like. Sharon Ferd, you're still awake. My goodness, you are a trooper. Well, welcome in. It is great to have you. KD Sharon Ferd is our author. She's barely awake. I doubt for much longer. But thank you so much for making it. I really appreciate it. And I'll still send you the YouTube link, Sharon Ferd, once it's uploaded. So you'll get it sometime tomorrow. Probably afternoon. Uh-oh. Stump Mama's here and she knows about the puzzle. Okay. Hi, Stump Mama. I made this cup of tea down here in my office, and I gotta tell you, it's magical. It's absolutely magical. You are absolutely welcome, KD. Would you prefer I say KD or Sharonford? What is your pick? What's your preference? That's some good tea. Katie is fine? Okay, fantastic. So everyone say hi to Katie. She's the author of our book that we're about to get into. So, as per usual, I have not read ahead. The only thing I've read is the back of the book. So, I'm going to read the back to you again now, and then we'll officially get into it. Okay? Let's move over to our read scene. This will also be a good test to see if I need to turn the light on above my head. All right, so here's the back of the book. Charlotte Sapori has led a wonderful life, safely tucked in the bosom of her family. Her mother, Irene Adler, is a renowned opera singer, while her father, Luca Sapori, does important government work that frequently takes him away from them. Charlotte is close to her older brother, Nico, and they are both doted on by their parents. All is well until her mother receives an unexpected diagnosis which shakes the family to its core. Knowing herself to be dying, Adler confesses to Charlotte things that have long been kept from her, telling her to find and read her diary. A distressed Luca Sapori tells his daughter to read his as well. And by the way, Luca Sapori is not his real name. In fact, she may have heard of him. He is actually the world-famous detective, Sherlock Holmes. Charlotte finds both diaries and plunges into the hidden world of Irene Adler and Sherlock Holmes as she discovers what brought them together, and how they managed to stay together for 30 years, despite having to battle the odds. So there you go. That is our story for the unseen future. Charm City Readers from Baltimore is here supporting KD. Oh, well, thank you, Charm City Readers. Thank you so much. I'm glad you're here. We're just about to get started. I'm going to crack open the first page. Let's get that new book smell. Looks like there's a little prologue in the front. And then there's a list of acknowledgements. And then we get right into the first chapter. Okay, so let me try something. Whew, that's bright. I can see the book now, though. I couldn't really see it very well before. I may have to find a way to kind of dim the light a bit, though. It's not one that I can control with like an Alexa device or something like that. But we'll figure that out. You know, new place, new stream, new recording studio, etc., etc. All right, well, thank you for coming in. Thank you for being here. New house, new recording studio, new stream, new book. It's just new everything. So here we go. If you get a light that shines toward your face, it'll even out the lighting. I'm just going to find one that something to dim the light above me, but thank you so much for the help. So very helpful, very helpful. Always with the pointers there, Stunt Mama. Just saying, I know you are. I have lots of lights that I can use, but I don't want to be blinded. Anyway, let me read this intro. Oh, wait. Just kidding. The intro is the same as the back, so never mind. I just realized that. We will skip that because we just read it, and we'll get right into the actual prologue. The prologue is A Very Bohemian Scandal. Irene Adler. It's strange how two words can turn your world upside down. I had no way of knowing that the witness to my wedding to the lawyer Godfrey Norton would come back to haunt me in years to come. My cousin Estelle once told me that the true love of one's life is the one who catches you unaware and changes you inexplicably. I was in my late 20s when I moved to London in 1887, having spent the past few years performing as a contralto at La Scala in Milan, and then a term as prima donna with the Imperial Opera of Warsaw. And it was in Warsaw where I first met Wilhelm Gottsreich Sigismund. Wow, this is a long name. Gottsreich Sigismund von Ormström. I feel like you have to say that last name with a bit of Anyway, Grand Duke of Kassel-Feldstein, the hereditary king of Bohemia. First try, nailed it. I suppose it all sounds rather grand, given his title, but Wilhelm was a kind, fun-loving man with a huge fan of the opera. A big man, in every sense of the word. He was a tall, imposing figure, well-built with broad shoulders and a muscular frame, black hair, sparkling brown eyes, and a handlebar mustache. He would often make a grand entrance with his entourage, insisting the cast join him for drinks afterwards. Should have said the name with more anger, 6 out of 10. Always a critic. They all adored him, of course. He was thoughtful and generous, so I thought little of it when a bouquet of flowers appeared in my dressing room every night. A few months after meeting Wilhelm, I was invited and accepted into the elitist fold of La Scala's theatre chorus. My dream had always been to train at the prestigious opera house. Wilhelm took the news badly. He told me he'd developed feelings for me, and while I had grown very fond of him, I knew I had to follow my dreams. Looking back, enrolling at La Scala was one of the happiest moments of my life. But then I gave it up for the position of prima donna at the Grand Opera House in Warsaw, which was the worst decision of my life. A few weeks after my arrival in Warsaw, a letter from Wilhelm revealed he had returned to the city upon learning of my new appointment and asked if he could take me to luncheon. I accepted the invitation. In truth, I was looking forward to seeing Wilhelm again. I missed his infectious humor, and I hoped we would remain friends. We spent a lovely morning together and laughed watching the waiters scurry around, eager to please him. His disposition and exuberant personality were so endearing, always the life and soul of the party. I was always aware he held a torch for me, but I was taken aback when he declared his undying love and his intention to make me his wife. I was speechless, swept away by the excitement of it all until I came to my senses. No, I shook my head. This can't be. Your parents would never allow it. Wilhelm became animated, insisting he would be king one day and could choose his own bride. Although I was young and naive, I knew the matter was not that simple. Wilhelm claimed he would speak to his parents, confident they would listen to reason. He pleaded with me to be patient. More than 4 weeks passed before I received a letter informing me of his failed attempts to win over his parents. His father was so enraged at the absurd prospect that he ordered Wilhelm to propose to Clodite Lothman von Saxe-Meiningen, the second daughter to the King of Scandinavia. There was no apology. Wilhelm even had the audacity to suggest I become his mistress, and to add, thank you for the follow, Charm City readers. To add insult to injury, demanded the return of a photograph he'd taken of us. Incensed at the disrespect I'd been shown, I decided to retire from the stage and move to London. They say hell hath tire from the it helps if I don't merge two lines together. They say hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. In an act of foolishness, which I later regretted, I told Wilhelm I intended to send the photograph to Clodite's family should the engagement be announced. This was admittedly scandalous behavior, but I was young and I had never experienced rejection. I still remember the feelings of anger, betrayal, and jealousy, as though I'd felt them only yesterday. They were all consuming. Wilhelm's response was to send his agents after me. Upon my arrival in London, I was searched at Charing Cross Station before my house in St. John's Wood was broken into. Wilhelm's pursuit of the photograph was relentless, although I was always one step ahead of him. Before I left Warsaw, I arranged with a friend to post the photograph, which was addressed to my agent in London, secreted in the sleeve of a book. I kept it in a secure hiding place, one I was certain Wilhelm's agents would never find. It was around this time I went to see my old friend, Sarah Burton, who was performing as Desdemona in Shakespeare's Othello at the Theatre Royal on Drury Lane. After the performance, she invited me to join her and a few friends for dinner at Rule's in Covent Garden. Covent Garden, not convent. That's an entirely different thing. And that was where I was introduced to Godfrey Norton. He was a dashing man, tall, dark, and I was instantly taken with him. Godfrey was neither vain nor arrogant, an attentive listener with a talent for putting those around him at ease. I told him about Wilhelm and what had transpired, but that did little to dampen his ardor. On the contrary, Godfrey pursued me relentlessly over the coming weeks. He sent me flowers and frequently escorted me to the theater and dinner. During the day, we enjoyed long leisurely strolls through the park, at which times Godfrey spoke incessantly of his hopes and dreams, his plans for the future, plans which he said included me. I was, of course, flattered by his attention, but I had no wish to give him any false hopes. I had naively convinced myself I was still in love with Wilhelm, until finally I realized I'd been possessed by a mere girlish infatuation. I didn't really know love at all. In fact, I doubted if it even existed. But Godfrey didn't care. He was certain that given enough time, I would learn to love him. After my experience with Wilhelm, I felt vulnerable. It was comforting to have someone on my side, so I gladly accepted his proposal. Godfrey arranged for a special license so we could be married right away. Having obtained a license that was only valid for a few days, Godfrey found a clergyman willing to carry out the ceremony at such short notice. This proved to be an extremely stressful period for both of us. Not only were we desperate to be married, but Godfrey was also attempting to obtain fake identities. We intended to flee London shortly after the wedding to be rid of Wilhelm and his agents for good. The thought of being constantly under surveillance was beginning to take its toll. I even considered returning the photo to Wilhelm, but Godfrey insisted we needed it as leverage in case Wilhelm had second thoughts and decided to come after us. I still remember the day Godfrey suddenly burst into our drawing room, pacing up and down like a caged animal, explaining the clergyman had sent an urgent telegram stating he was unable to perform the wedding ceremony as planned. If we were to be married, it had to be at the hour or not at all. We need to get to the church by 12 noon. Godfrey looked frantically at his watch. The time was now 11:30. We must travel separately. Wait 5 minutes, no longer, then follow me. I arrived at the church to find Godfrey's cab at the front of the main entrance, the horse sweating profusely. I entered the church to find Godfrey and the clergyman in a heated altercation at the altar. The clergyman explained to Godfrey that he could not marry us without a witness, as the marriage would not be legal. Godfrey ran his hand through his hair, a look of profound exasperation upon his face. Suddenly, we were disturbed by a cough. I noticed an elderly gentleman who had slipped into one of the aisles. Without hesitation, Godfrey ran over to the man. "Oh, thank God! You'll do. Come!" "What?" cried the man, a startled expression on his face. "Come, man, come," Godfrey said, exasperated, "or it won't be legal." Godfrey dragged the poor man towards the altar, where he pledged things he could never have been privy to. But nevertheless, the man proved indispensable in our betrothal. After the ceremony, Godfrey and I thanked the gentleman, and I slipped a sovereign into his hand. At the church door, Godfrey and I embraced before going our separate ways. Godfrey set off to the temple, while I returned home. Dusk had already fallen by the time the landau, I'm not sure what that is actually. By the time the landau pulled up outside the house. A group of men stood under the street lamp. They rushed forward to open the door, no doubt in the hope of earning a tip, but one man was pushed roughly aside by another. A fierce altercation broke out, one of which was further agitated by two guardsmen who took sides with the first man. I jumped out of the cab in a desperate attempt to defuse the situation. Londa as a carriage. Sorry about the long words. No. I love the language you've used. It's just since I wasn't around in the late 1800s, I am not accustomed to all of them. But that's okay. Never apologize for your choice of words to make the text authentic, please. I love it. And this reads very smoothly so far, which I also appreciate. So, good job. And now I have lost my place. Oh, right. I jumped out of the cab in a desperate attempt to defuse the situation. Finding myself surrounded by a group of angry-looking men, I suddenly felt afraid for my safety, my heart beating 19 to the dozen. Just for the record, neither was I. Good to know. By the way, KD, how does it feel having someone read your book aloud? Is this the first time, or has this happened before? What's the 411 on that kind of information? I'm always curious to know with a new author that I've been reading for the first time. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed an elderly clergyman enter the throng, forcing his way through the crowd. He nodded and smiled at me reassuringly. But before he could reach me, the man cried out and fell to the ground, blood flowing freely from his face. At his fall, the guardsmen and the other boys panicked and fled the scene. Neighbors gathered around the stricken man. I ran up the steps, fumbling in my bag for the front door key before turning back. "Is the poor man hurt?" I asked. "He's dead," a voice cried out. It's the first time I've had people read chapters in book launches, but this is amazing. Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I think it's obviously it makes sense to have people read a chapter or two every once in a while just to make sure things sound, sound like what they do in our heads. But thank you. I'm glad you're enjoying it. "No, there's life in him," shouted another. "But he'll be gone before you can get him to the hospital." "He's a brave fellow," said another woman. "They would have had the lady's purse and watch if it hadn't been for him. He's breathing now." "He can't lie in the street. May we bring him in, Mom?" asked another voice. "Of course, and bring him into the sitting room," I said, leading them towards the hallway. The men followed me through, gently laying the man on the sofa. I brought him a glass of water and a pillow. There was something about his eyes that seemed familiar. They stared at me with a brooding intensity. His index finger caught my hand as I handed him the glass of water, sending a quiver through my body. He sat up on the couch and motioned for me to open the window. I asked Tilly, my housemate, to do so. The next thing I knew, I heard a cry of fire as thick clouds of smoke engulfed the room, billowing in from the open window. I ran into the hallway and opened the sliding panel that hid the photograph of Wilhelm and me. I had just laid my hands on it when came a cry of, "False alarm!" I quickly returned the photograph to its hiding place. Looking around the sitting room, I caught a glimpse of rushing figures, and it was at that moment I realized I had not only been tricked by the celebrated consulting detective Sherlock Holmes, but I had also foolishly given away the hiding place of the picture that Wilhelm was so desperate to possess. I had been warned by friends that if Wilhelm employed an agent, he would choose the best. And that man would undoubtedly be Sherlock Holmes, whose address had been given to me. I went back to the sitting room to find the clergyman had disappeared. I quickly changed into the disguise of a slim youth. My coachman John dropped me off at Baker Street, and it was there I saw Holmes standing under a street lamp, fumbling in his pocket for his keys, and I caught a final glimpse of those mesmerizing grey eyes I had already seen twice that day, albeit in disguise, and at that moment my heart stopped in my chest. "A good night, Mr. Holmes," I said before mingling with the throng of people on the pavement, intending to walk off into the night. But before I left, I heard Holmes call out to Dr. Watson. "I've heard that voice before," said Holmes. "Now I wonder who the deuce that could have been." I smiled to myself as I realized that Irene Adler had got one over on the celebrated detective, and I instinctively knew he would not like that one bit. Making my way to the temple, I explained to my shocked husband all that had transpired. We returned to Bryony Lodge, quickly packed my clothes and a few personal possessions, including the photo of Wilhelm and me. We knew it was only a matter of time before Holmes would return, possibly with a search warrant and the Metropolitan Police. Godfrey had secured our passage to the continent. We would leave from Charing Cross the following afternoon. Dinner that evening was a somber affair. We stayed with Sarah, who could see I was worried. I felt sick with apprehension. I told her I would not feel safe until Godfrey and I boarded the train at Charing Cross. "When do you think Holmes will return to the villa?" asked Sarah. "At first light, I would expect. He will doubt want to catch me unawares. Why do you ask?" "Please, allow me to help you." She stared at me imploringly. "Whatever do you mean?" "Suppose I was to pose as your maid." Sarah laughed at my perplexed expression. "I shall sleep at the villa this evening and be ready for Holmes in full disguise from dawn onwards." "What's wrong?" she chuckled. "Don't you think I can pull it off?" "I don't doubt it for 1 second. You are one of the finest character actresses of your generation." I shook my head. "But that would be far too risky." Sarah waved her hand dismissively. "Don't be silly. Consider it a wedding gift." She laid her hand on my arm. "I know you have concerns, but don't you see, this way you will have closure." With my photographic memory, well versed in remembering lines, I will be able to narrate to you word for word all that transpires. "All right, but only if you're sure. I can't begin to thank you for all you've done for Godfrey and me." "Nonsense." Sarah took my hand in hers. "Do you know I'm rather looking forward to meeting the celebrated detective?" "Rather you than me," I shuddered. "And what will you call yourself?" Godfrey quizzed. How about Miss Catherine O'Neill? Colleen from Belfast?" said Sarah in a thick Irish accent. "Sounds perfect to me." Godfrey laughed, and I took a sip of tea. I missed the Irish accent part. Oops. This tea is just delicious. After breakfast the following morning, Godfrey set off for the last time to the temple. Brilliant. Before he left, he arranged for our luggage to be collected later that afternoon. All I needed to do was turn up at Charing Cross to meet my husband. I waited impatiently for Sarah to return. In truth, I was far more concerned about the sequence of events that would have taken place at Serpentine Avenue than our escape to the continent. So you can imagine my relief when I heard the sound of a carriage pull up outside the front door at 11 o'clock and saw my friend's smiling face beaming at me as she jumped down from the landau and ran up the front steps toward me. I threw my arms around my friend, hugging her tightly. "Thank God you're back. I've been so worried. Do you think Holmes suspected anything?" Sarah shook her head. "I'm sorry I'm late. I wanted to make sure I wasn't being followed. And to answer your question, Nen, no. I doubt he suspected a thing. He wasn't the least bit interested in me." "Amlas, good to see you. And Atari's here. Hi, Atari. You want the daily book bunk? You got it. There you go. I hope that didn't hurt too much. It's good to see you. How are you?" Sarah insisted on pouring us a cup of fresh coffee before she continued to update me on the events of the morning. "I need to concentrate. I have no wish to fluff my lines," she laughed. Sarah told me she'd been scrubbing the front steps when a carriage pulled up outside Bryony Lodge at approximately 8:30. "Well, you know how I am such a stickler for detail," Sarah chuckled, continuing her narrative with a theatrical flair. "Holmes, Watson, and Wilhelm Ormstein all jumped out of the brougham and were duly greeted with a sardonic smile by yours truly." Oh boy, okay. Mama House Gaming has redeemed Reed as Batman. I will try my best. This should be quite interesting. Okay.
"Top of the morning to you, gentlemen," I said, staring straight at the celebrated detective. "Mr. Sherlock Holmes, I believe." "I am Mr. Holmes, Batman," he replied, although rather ungraciously. He looked at me with a rather puzzled and questioning gaze. "Indeed," I said. "My mistress told me you were likely to call. She left earlier this morning with her husband by the 5:15 train from Charing Cross, headed for the continent. Batman. Well, you could have knocked Holmes down with a feather. His face was white as putty, as if he'd seen a ghost." "Do you mean that she has left England?" He stared at me in amazement. "Never to return," I said. And then Wilhelm Ormstein chipped in with his strongly marked German accent. God, he was an imposing sight. He must be 6'4" in his stocked feet. And the papers? Ormstein quizzed. Then all is lost.
There you go. There's a bit of Batman. It's been a long time since I've done a
Batman. I'm vengeance.
Oh, that reminds me. I need to change or add one of the voices. The Sorting Hat from Harry Potter. I've been practicing.
Yes. A lot of intelligence, I see. Where to place you? Where to place you? I know. Gryffindor!
Congratulations on the new place. Is it what you imagine? It is pretty much everything I imagined. And we're still making some changes. I've got a couch coming tomorrow, a big L-shaped couch, a couple of TVs coming. I set up a new entertainment center. We've got a new dining set, or not a set, but a new table and some chairs that we picked out with a bench as well for a bench seat. So lots of things happening. And when it's all put together, I will take a couple of pictures and I'll be able to share it with you guys. So yeah, but we are making really good progress. I've been able to use my bench press. I've started doing an ab roller workout in the evenings. It's been great. It's refreshing, moving into a new house with new spaces and new setups and everything. It's been absolutely amazing. And for those that didn't see it, since I'm taking a quick break here, let me show you a little bit more of the room behind me. So that's a little bit more of the room. What you can't see is the wall opposite the desk that you're seeing in this picture, which has my fridge and my tea station, all the books that we've been reading on stream, things like that, which there's actually more piled up on the chair. You just can't see it. I need to find a spot for those too. And then, of course, there's a little dog bed. The dog's upstairs, though, but during my working days, if the dog wants to come down or the cat, they'll have a little place where they can hang out. Like the color? Thank you. It's called Midnight Moscow. So there you go. And then, of course, this room is all soundproofed, so that's been really cool. Lots of voice acting will happen in here. So, all right. Back to our book, which I need to update the command for this, but at the moment, it is !song. Is it more green or blue? It is definitely blue. Absolutely blue. If you go to Sherwin-Williams' website and then search Midnight Moscow, it's either Midnight Moscow or Moscow Midnight. I cannot remember which. I think it's Midnight Moscow. You should see a version of it, or even just Google Sherwin-Williams Midnight Moscow. You'll see it. All right. We're on page 10. We're almost done with the first chapter here. I think this is still the prologue, isn't it? Yes, we're on the prologue still. So let me keep going. Never to return, I said. And then Wilhelm Ormston chipped in with his strongly marked German accent. I know I've read this part, but I'm just kind of getting us back on track. God, he was an imposing sight. He must be 6'4" in his stockinged feet. And the papers? Ormstein quizzed. Then all is lost. We shall see, said Holmes before rudely barging past me and rushing into the drawing room, quickly followed by Ormston, Dr. Watson, and yours truly. The men were shocked to discover the room in disarray, furniture scattered in every direction as if it had been hurriedly ransacked, which of course it had. It was like a scene from a French farce. Holmes rushed to the bell pull, tore back the small sliding shutter, pulled out a photograph and the letter you had addressed to him, Nin. He was mortified to discover the photograph was not you and Wilhelm Ormston, but instead the one you had replaced it with, Irene Alder, or I think that's supposed to be Adler, in full evening dress at La Scala. My God, how I wished I had a camera. The look on his face was priceless. One of utter amazement. I don't know how I managed to keep my composure. Holmes tore open the envelope and, much to my amusement, all three men read the letter together, with the same look of astonishment on their faces. I'll be back, need to do some things and start dinner. No worries, Mom Mouse Gaming. Enjoy dinner. Num nums. The letter read in this way. My dear Sherlock Holmes, you really did it very well. You took me in completely. Until after the alarm of fire, I had no suspicion. But then I found out how I betrayed myself, and I began to think. I had been warned against you months ago. I had been told that if the king employed an agent, it would certainly be you, and your address had been given to me. Yet, with all this, you made me reveal what you wanted to know. Even after becoming suspicious, I found it hard to think evil of such a dear, kind old clergyman. But you know, I had been trained as an actress myself. Male costumes are nothing new to me. I often take advantage of the freedom they give. I sent John the coachman to watch you, ran upstairs, got into my walking clothes, as I call them, and came down just as you departed. Well, I followed you to your door and made sure that I was really an object of interest to the celebrated Mr. Sherlock Holmes. I rather imprudently wished you a good night. Then I went to see my husband at the temple. We both thought of the best resource was flight when pursued by so formidable an opponent. I'm off to put the kids down. Talk to you later. Sounds good, Amlas. Tell the kids good night. So you will find the nest empty when you call tomorrow. As to the photograph, your client may rest in peace. I love and am loved by a better man than he. The king may do what he will without hindrance from one whom has cruelly wronged. He has cruelly wronged. I keep it only to safeguard myself and preserve a weapon that will always secure me from any steps he might take in the future. I leave a photograph which he might care to possess, and I remain, my dear Mr. Sherlock Holmes, very truly yours, Irene Norton Nee Adler. What? Oh, what a woman! Cried Ormston after all three had read the letter. Or had read your letter, excuse me.
Did I not tell you how quick and resolute she was? Would she not have made an admirable queen? It is not a pity that she was not on my level. Wilhelm addressed Holmes with a searching gaze. From what I have seen of the young lady, she seems indeed to be on a very different level to your majesty, said Holmes dryly, fixing Ormsden with a cold stare. I am sorry that I have not been able to bring your majesty's business to a more successful conclusion. On the contrary, my dear sir, cried Ormsden, grinning like a Cheshire cat. Nothing could be more successful. I know that her word is inviolate. The photograph is now as safe as if it had been thrown into the fire. I'm glad to hear your majesty say so. I am immensely indebted to you. Pray tell me in what way I can reward you. This ring? He slipped an emerald snake from his finger, holding it out towards the celebrated detective in his open palm. Holmes shook his head. Your Majesty has something that I should value even more highly. You have but to name it, said Ormsden. This photograph. We all stared at him in amazement. Irene's photograph, cried Ormsden. Certainly, if you wish it. I thank your Majesty, said Holmes. Then there is no more to be done in the matter. I have the honor to wish you a very good morning. Holmes bowed, picked up the photograph and the letter before abruptly turning away, completely ignoring the hand that Ormsden held out to him. And then Holmes and Dr. Watson left the building as quickly as they came in, without as much as a by your leave for the little old me. Oh well. No one takes much notice of a domestic servant, and that's the shame of it. I stared at Sarah incredulously. I am so glad you were there, Sarah. I don't think I would believe one word of that story if it had been narrated by anyone else. Why would Holmes ask for my photograph in return for Wilhelm's ring? If Sherlock Holmes wanted my photography, he needed only to request a copy from La Scala. That would cost him a few pounds at most. It doesn't make any sense. Holmes has never struck me as the sentimental type. Who knows what's in a man's heart? Sarah shrugged. I gave up on men long ago. But I think you're missing the point, my dear. He clearly wanted the photograph you had chosen, the one you laid your hands on. Well, I guess we will never know, as it is unlikely I will ever see him again. I sighed. Some months later, a friend of mine told me that Holmes used to make merry regarding the cleverness of women, but Watson said he had not heard him do so since our encounter. And when Holmes spoke of me or referred to my photograph, which held pride of place on his mantelpiece at Baker Street, it was always without exception under the honorable title of The Woman, which was probably the finest compliment of my life. Another 7 years would pass before our paths would cross again, and I came to realize how strongly his presence would feature in my life. Our next encounter would be the start of an intense and profoundly meaningful relationship that would endure for over 30 years. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was only the beginning. That was just the prologue. But what an insight into the beginnings of it all. Almost taken by a king, only to then be hunted, shall we say. Loving it so far? Dang. Well, don't thank me.
thank Katie. It's going to be a long night. Well, Katie, just so that you are aware of time frames in case I had not mentioned, I only read for 2 hours at a time. So, for example, it's almost been an hour. So I'll read a little bit more, but then by 8 o'clock my time, 2 a.m. your time, that's when I try to close up. If I'm in the middle of a chapter, or at least, got a few pages left, I'm not just going to stop in the middle. I will at least finish the chapter. But that way, we don't kind of get lost and forget what happened, or forget where we were or anything like that. And then Thursday, I'll be back at it. Same time frame. So every Sunday, every Thursday, unless I announce, something's happening and I can't be here. But that is generally the plan. All right. Well, with that in mind, I'm going to take another couple of sips of my tea, and then we'll get right into chapter 1. Puzzle's coming along pretty well, by the way. Nice work. I believe it's 440 pages. Oh, and we have an ad that's about to start, which is actually great timing. I'm going to run the ad. It's 2 minutes. Once the ad is done, we should have an hour of uninterrupted reading, which case we can get back into the story. So I'll run the ads, then we'll start reading. Depending on where you live in the world, depends on how long the ads will go. As that seems to be the case. I see no ads. Huh, that's weird. Refresh, try again. I don't know. I wish I could keep it like this, but that makes the text too difficult to read. There's too much shadow. Shadow. Aw, super. Thank you so much for giving Katie a sub. That is really kind of you. You didn't have to do that. That was really nice. Okay. Let me spin the wheel. Just kidding. Let me refresh and log back in. Then we'll spin the wheel. I thought I did this yesterday. Apparently not. Now we spin. Five curls. That's easy enough. We'll add 5 curls to the list. Thank you, sir. I don't know if Katie is familiar with Twitch, besides just being here for the read. Katie, I don't know if you're aware of what just happened, but basically our friend Super, also a streamer, just gifted you a month subscription to my channel, which means there's no ads for you anymore. So you will never experience any interruptions from Twitch's ads that they run because of that subscription. No one is ever required to be a subscriber. It just gets you uninterrupted content It also gets you access to emotes to use within the channel, things like that. So, yeah. So Super gifted that to you. So thank you, Super. And Night Marcher's here. What's up, sir? Good to see you. Let's give Mr. Super a shout out here.
Meet him, man. The best.
There he is. Handsome Canadian. Good Lord, that was loud. Not too much, just eating me some pizza. Ooh, nice. Let's do a couple more shout outs too, and then we'll get back to reading. We have Le Stunt Mama.
But yes, if you are looking
Oh,
for
it's Truck
really
Mama.
good American Truck Simulator driving.
And then we've got Night Marcher.
Ma'am? Jesus.
Oh, this is an old one. That was an old clip. Jeez, where did that come from? I mean, it looked old. I think it was old. Oh. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, I was a young man back then. And you're welcome, Stunt Mama. Absolutely. Chapter 1. Some people, like my mother, believe in fate, while others, like my father, adopt respectful skepticism. However, I am confident the following events excuse me. I am confident the following events would not have taken place if it wasn't for the murder of Godfrey Jones, my mother's first husband. My mother, the acclaimed contralto Irene Adler, known as Neen. Is it Nen? Neen? N-E-N-E? I feel like I'm saying it wrong. To those closest to her, was the most beautiful woman I ever knew. My brother Nico and I attribute our success in life to the moral altruism and academic education we received from Neen and our beloved father, Luca Sapori. Neen, right the first time? Well done. Or wait, did I say Neen the first time or did I say Nen? I don't remember what I said. Huh. N-E-N-E, but pronounced N-E-E-N, maybe? Mitchell's here. Hi, Mitchell. Right. Lost my place. Nothing new there. My brother and I were cared for by our Aunt Estelle whenever our parents were away. We adored Estelle. She treated us like her own children, especially Nico. She had a real soft spot for him. Who wouldn't? He was a striking boy, tall, slim, with blazing blue eyes, and darkly handsome. We were all thrilled when he won a scholarship to Harvard Medical School in Boston, Massachusetts, graduating as a pediatric surgeon with the highest honors. My mother wept tears of joy throughout the graduation ceremony, much to the embarrassment of my father and me. We should have expected it. My mother could get sentimental over burnt toast. I would too. You only make toast when you really, really want it. Nico had accepted a position at the Children's Hospital Boston, working under the inaugural Chief of Surgery, Dr. Harvey Cushing. Our parents were, of course, delighted, as was I. We were all incredibly proud of Nico and his many accomplishments. My brother showed an avid interest in music and philosophy in his early years. He now had a glittering career ahead of him. Helping other people, especially children, had been his primary vocation in life from an early age. Born in the UK to an English mother and an Anglo-Italian father, our father fostered our love of Britain and many happy childhood memories. The country is such a beautiful place, one that will always hold a special place in our hearts, from the architecture to the beautiful landscapes and countryside. In addition to our main family home, Red Oaks, a sprawling colonial townhouse in Trenton, New Jersey, our parents owned a 10-acre farm on the beautiful Sussex Downs. My mother, brother, and I would make the 6-day transatlantic crossing from New York to Liverpool on the Majestic during the holidays. We regularly visited Ash Tree Farm, which was our favorite place because my brother and I were allowed so much freedom. We would run down to the Arundel every morning and swim with the tide in the Arun River. Mother called it down the shore. Well, she was from New Jersey. We rode our ponies in the afternoons and had picnics by the river. Sometimes with our father when he was at home. He would sometimes take us down to the 3 Tons Inn for an early supper. Those were such beautiful memories. Father was routinely away for weeks, sometimes months at a time. He traveled extensively, working for the British government, a position he rarely spoke of to anyone. Consequently, there was always an air of mystery and speculation regarding his profession for my brother and me. Nico was adamant father was a spy. I wasn't as convinced. My father showed no interest in politics, although he was certainly clever enough. His knowledge of the law and sciences was phenomenal. So my brother and I became adept at standing beneath the stairwell, listening to the clandestine conversations behind the closed doors of our parents' chambers, which was thrilling, yet terrifying at the same time. But, of course, Father was far too clever for us. He soon realized what we were up to, so we received a stern dressing down and a look that would have curdled cream. We never tried that again. When my parents grew older, they spent most of their time at the farm. My mother rode her beloved horse, Shadow, a magnificent black Frisian, a gift from my father from the first Christmas they spent at the farm. We would find her in the wildflower meadow if she were not with Shadow. My father teased Mother that she loved her horse more than him, but I knew better. My mother loved Shadow and adored her children, but my father, well, he was on a completely different level. As for Father, he worshipped the ground Nin walked on. After more than 30 years together, his eyes still lit up when she walked into the room. I once asked my mother for her love advice on how to find the right man. She told me it was far better to be alone than with the wrong person, and never to marry anyone unless they could convince you that they couldn't live without you. Mind you, I have always been fussy. Mother knew that I was looking for a man like my father, with values, strength, integrity, and intelligence. Every man I met, of course, fell short of my unrealistic expectations. Mother would look at me and sigh. Charlotte, value your independence and build a life worth living before you consider getting married. When I first met your father, I didn't like him all that much. But as I got to know him, a friendship developed that blossomed into a love affair. So never give up. Love will find you when you least expect it. And when that day arrives, life may never be the same again. Mother's moral code was never to be afraid, never be jealous. Jealousy, in her opinion, was a complete waste of time and energy. She's not wrong. So, I asked her how she and my father kept their relationship fresh. Mom told me the secret of any successful relationship is to work at it. Work at it every day. I laughed and said, even if you're with someone you adore. Especially then, she said. How ironic that our farm, where my parents spent so many happy hours, was where my mother would have been on the day she died, had she not traveled to Trenton to celebrate my Aunt Estelle's 70th birthday. We had all been invited to a social gathering to mark the occasion. In the end, only my mother and I attended, my brother being unable to take time off work. My father was recovering from a nasty chest infection. His doctor advised him not to travel, reminding him he was no spring chicken at 73. Despite my father's protestations, my mother agreed with the doctor, insisting he recuperate at the farm until she returned. My parents had no way of knowing that would be the last time they ever saw each other. And that is the end of chapter 1. So, chapter 1 has given us a tease into, well, what could be the end? Or is it just the beginning? It's a lovely story so far. I didn't want to wait to start reading this. I wanted to jump right in because, well, that's what we do here. We read. Not that it wasn't fun playing games for a few weeks. I had a great time. But the waiting game, and not only just the waiting, but also seeing the book on my desk, kind of taunting me, was, well, not fun. But the point I get to is that it was definitely worth waiting for, because I think I would have been very annoyed with myself had we read a couple of chapters and then stopped for like 2 weeks and not read anything. I think it's been 2 weeks. My mind and time frames has been such a blur, but I think it's been roughly 2 weeks since I last streamed. But yeah, I would have been very annoyed had I started reading, gotten into the story, and then had to stop and potentially, not remember enough of what we have read for the rest of it to make sense. So, as painful it was to endure, it was worth the wait.
Broforce.
Broforce is a fun one. It looks so simple, but it is deceivingly difficult. And KD, you are absolutely welcome. And I want to thank you again for letting me read your book and trusting me with your work. I know what it's like to put time and effort into something that you cherish. And it can be daunting, have other people read it and just to know what they might think. Yay or nay. But it's all yays from me, so good job. It looks like the puzzle is just about finished. There's only a few pieces left. Who's gonna put the last one in? Stunt Mama finishes it proud and strong. Thank you for reading so eloquently. Well, we've only just begun. Don't thank me yet. Good job on the puzzle. Town Square at Christmas. Nicely done. I like it. Got that tiny village vibe. I love it. Teamwork. Yay, puzzle. Regardless what G says about you, Stump Mama, you are good in my books. Aw, that's sweet. Do you want me to throw up another puzzle, or are you kind of at a happy place with the puzzles and don't need to do any more? You tell me. I can always throw up another one. Doesn't have to be as many pieces. That one was 440, I believe. I can do a shorter one if you like, or we can just leave it alone. Yes, good jobbing indeed. Go for it, Super says. Okay. I shall go for it. Give me 1 second. So KD, we do, as you can see, live community-based puzzles. And anyone can get involved. Let's just do... We'll do 276 pieces. That's not too bad. Okay, I've got the link. Let me paste that into here. Save. All right, the new puzzle is ready. That's fine, thanks. Another one would be good. Okay. All right, new puzzle is ready. This one looks like this when it's done. It's like a little workshop. All right. Chapter 2. My mind often drifts back to the events leading up to my mother's death. The day she died remains indelibly imprinted on my memory. I still recall the silk print dress she wore on that ill-fated day. Our housemaid, Stella, found Mother collapsed in the drawing room and called for an ambulance. My mind was racing as I traveled with her to All Souls Hospital. I was sobbing and shaking uncontrollably as I held her hand in mine. The consultant said it had been a mild attack. He was hopeful she would fully recover. I was allowed to stay with my mother in a private room where she slept for some time. I was gently braiding her hair when she opened her beautiful violet eyes. Even in a hospital nightgown, she looked as beautiful as ever. Age had not yet withered her features, although she appeared a little paler than usual. Smiling at me, she squeezed my hand. "Charlotte, why don't you go home and get some rest?" "Mother, you are the one who needs rest. You're always putting others first." "Well, if you won't go home, my darling girl, come and sit here with me for a moment. There are events in my past that you are not yet aware of, things that I need to tell you." She paused. "I don't want you to worry. Death does not exist to me, but please bear in mind the events that transpired were primarily to protect you and your brother. Always remember that." I squeezed her hand. She was starting to worry me. "It's all right. It was only a mild attack. The doctor said that with plenty of rest, there was no reason why you won't make a full recovery." My mother sighed, gesturing to the locker beside her bed. She asked me to pass her bag. I handed it to her and watched as she unfastened the clasp and took out a silver key. "Well, Charlotte Grace, you are right, of course.
I am still exhausted. I need to sleep right now. I want you to return to the house and have dinner with your Aunt Estelle. Please send her my heartfelt love. This is the key to my bedside cabinet. You'll find my journal there. When the time was right, your father and I planned to tell you and Nico the whole story. But, Charlotte, before you read it, pour yourself a glass of wine, sit back on my bed, and make yourself comfortable. I raised my eyebrows, looking at her curiously as she held my hand in hers. I know you have questions, Charlotte. Your father told you to question everything and not take anything at face value. He gave you good advice. We raised you to have an open mind. Trust me, my darling girl, you will need it. Everything you will want to know is in my journal. The madness that was my life began in the city of London in February 1893, the day my first husband, Godfrey Norton, was found brutally murdered. The nurse entered the room with a jug of Raiders. No, I'm just kidding. Brian Fury, raiding with a party of 8. Thank you so much. Welcome in, everybody. Hello. Meek. Hi, Meek. Anthony's Baked. Hello. Steel Buffalo Gaming. How you doing? My goodness. Thank you so much for raiding over. And a real... Dead Space. Thank you so much. And Real Good Girl, nice to see you as well. Thank you so much for the follow. Indeed, brought some friends over for Calm Vibes. Well, you've found it. Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I am the book father. I'm a voice actor. I'm an author. And here we do reading streams for the most part. We read books. Right now we're reading the one that you can kind of see above my head in the corner here. It's called Song for Someone. We just started it tonight. Very excited about it. It's a great book so far. Thank you, Meek, for pointing me out. I really, really appreciate it. And let me give you a follow. Real Good Girl, I thought it was funny because you said brain sucks at raid messages. And I was like, that could be a legitimate thing. Because if you didn't type it, your brain sucks. So... You get called that as well? Well, there you go. All right. We love you over at the treehouse. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Mr. Thomas is a cool dude. That's for sure. Well, welcome in, everybody. If you have to raid and run, I understand. I get that. We've read the prologue of this book. We've read chapter 1, and we just kind of got started with chapter 2. So that is where we're at right now. So you're coming in at a good time. Someone called him Brain Fury and it stuck. I like it. I like it a lot. So yes, welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for raiding over. And I realized I didn't have my room cam on, so there you go. You can see the Christmas lights in the background. Okay. We're on page 19 of our brand new book. I also forgot to check how many pages. Looks like 362. So we have a lot of book to go, and we are in no rush.
because we are enjoying the story. Much love. I'll be listening and lurking. Sounds fantastic. I appreciate that very much. And thank you again. Thank you again. Right. The nurse entered the room with a jug of fresh water and my mother's medication. Then the consultant arrived to check her pulse and heart rate. Finally, he turned to me, gently placing his hand on my shoulder. Your mother needs to rest now, Miss Sapori. You may come back in the morning. We have your number at home. We will call you if there is any change in her condition. Mother lay back on her pillow and sighed. My dearest Charlotte, when you speak to your father, please tell him that I love him and that he is not to worry. It's all thanks to him that I've finally reached it. I shook my head. Reached what, Mother? My hill of Calvary. Your father will understand. I'd wish I'd met him years earlier. I wish it had always been him. I looked at her anxiously. She sounded delirious. My parents had been together for over 30 years. This did not make any sense. I presumed it to be the medication talking. Mother closed her eyes, whispering something I couldn't quite make out that sounded like, I can go now. I shook my head. I must have misheard her. She was telling me that I could go now. I kissed her on the cheek and whispered, I love you. Sleep well. I put the key into my bag and returned to the house. To this day, I have no memory of leaving the hospital or getting a cab home. I joined Estelle for dinner later that evening, although we hardly ate a thing. I managed to convince her that Mother would be fine. Then I made my excuses and phoned my brother to update him on Mother's progress. Nico was pleased with our mother's prognosis, having already called the hospital to check up on her. He promised he would be on the first train out of Boston the following morning. I then phoned my father at our farm on the beautiful Sussex Downs. He seemed relieved to hear from me, although I could sense the anxiety in his voice. I explained what the doctors had said and told him not to worry, and that Mother would recover. He didn't sound at all convinced, although he perked up a little when I mentioned that Nico would be traveling from Boston the following day. I asked how he was, only to hear him complain that the doctor was useless and the medication he'd prescribed wasn't working. However, Father admitted he felt a little better after indulging in whiskey, honey, and soda water. I laughed at his response. My father had never been a good patient. Fortunately, he was rarely ill. He had a strong constitution, far more robust than most. Charlotte, you have no idea how good it is to hear your voice. Please try to get some sleep, I replied. I promise I will call you back in the morning. Oh, I nearly forgot. Mother asked me to send you her love. She said not to worry, that you helped her reach it, her hill of Calvary, whatever that means. My father gasped. Have you read it yet? No, not yet. Mother asked me to read her journal this evening. I frowned. Wait a minute. How on earth could you possibly know? My father paused before he answered. I could feel the tension in his voice. Charlotte, I could do with a drink right now. I will speak to you again tomorrow. Be sure to tell your mother that I love her. I would give anything in the world to be with her right now. I think she knows that. Tell her anyway. I wish you a good night, Charlotte. If you need anything, call me. It doesn't matter what time. Promise you will do that? Yes, sir, of course. I will be sure to do so. I retired to Mother's bedroom just as she had asked. I sat on her bed for a while, staring at the key, sipping from my glass of red wine. Opening the locker, I took out the journal, making myself comfortable on the four-poster bed. Opening the thick black book which contained her memoir, I smiled at the introduction, which was dedicated to Nico and me. I began to read Mother's words from the brown-tinted pages, bearing the unmistakable patina of age. My heart stopped in my mouth as I digested her first sentence. The tears began to flow, releasing with a start that Mother had only asked me to read her journal because she thought she was dying. The thought completely broke my heart. My grandparents, Alfred and Marianne, had died prematurely due to heart problems. I sat on the bed, sobbing uncontrollably. I called the hospital only to be told Mother was sleeping peacefully and there was no cause for alarm. I asked if I could come back to see her, and they said not until the following morning. Due to the lateness of the hour, they didn't want the other patients to be disturbed. Feeling reassured, I sat back down on the bed and read her journal. Hello, my darlings Nico and Charlotte. Well, I guess if you have found this, I am either dead or deranged. As you can see, I have kept a private journal. It was never intended for publication, but I would like you both to read it. I want you to know that any decisions your father and I made regarding your future were to protect you, our precious children. It was a tremendous privilege to be your mother. It was one of the best things that ever happened to me. The other was meeting your father. I cherished every single moment I have spent with you all. I send you both my heartfelt love. You are intelligent, beautiful, wonderful human beings, clever, considerate, and kind. When growing up, my Nico, the sagacious scholar, you were a 40-year-old trapped in a child's body. But now, a responsible young man with an exceptional level of intelligence. And then my lovely Charlotte, who Luca describes as a revolver. Sharp as a tack, fearless and curious, she can at times be all dramatic, much to the disdain of her long-suffering father. I laughed out loud at that. It was true that my father would go out of his way to avoid meaningless interaction. I was aware that I often drove him to distraction, especially when I was younger and demanded that he read to me. Literature, novels, and children's stories had little or no appeal to him, but he would begrudgingly read to me if I asked. Then, shaking his head, he would roll his eyes and say, "Not Alice in Wonderland again, Charlotte." Finally, he would add extra excitement to the text and always stop at a cliffhanger. My beautiful Charlotte, who is funny, sharp-witted and kind, always believe in yourself. Be anything in the world you want to be. And if I have sung my last song by the time you read this narrative, then so be it. I have seen my own mortality many times. Although I briefly crossed over to the other side, there was nothing to fear from what I could see. The sun will continue to set. Despite everything, the world will still turn, even when we are not in it. I will not lie to you. Grief is a long-lasting pain, the price we pay for loving someone. Love of the highest mark. I do not think it ever goes away entirely, but the overwhelming sadness does get easier with time. We can only hope to live on with the memories of those who loved us. And when we lose someone, we shouldn't wallow in all of the misery. Instead, we should think of all the love and beauty that person has left behind. I turned over the page and gasped at the introduction. London, 13th February, 1893. The day that would change everything and turn my world upside down began when my husband, Godfrey Jones, was found brutally murdered. I turned over the page just as the phone began to ring. I answered it with some trepidation, thinking the worst, that it was the hospital. I was surprised to hear my father's voice instead, especially so soon after our last conversation. "Charlotte, I'm sorry to disturb you at this late hour, but you deserve to know the whole truth. I, too, kept a record of our time together, your mother and me. When you feel ready, I want you to go to my study and open the safe. The code is your mother's date of birth. My chronicles are in there. I wish I could be with you to explain everything, but before you read our narratives, there is something else I need to tell you." He paused for a moment. "I am not who you think I am." "Whatever do you mean?" I cried. "My name is Sherlock Holmes. You may have heard of me." And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the cliff edge known as Chapter 2. My. What a fun chapter. Absolutely wonderful stuff. Brilliant. I agree. You should. Oh. Indeed, thank you. You should talk to the author. She wrote it. Man, I don't know what I did a couple of nights ago, but I woke up and I couldn't bite down all the way, close my teeth. Something up here at the right side of my jaw feels like it's, I don't know, not in alignment or something, because I can close it just about, but the right side at the very, very top, TMJ? Yeah, maybe. Although I'm trying to remember what that means. I don't remember. I gotta look it up. TMJ stands for temporum mandibular joint, which is a joint that connects the lower jaw to the skull. TMJ disorders, or TMD, can affect the jaw joints, muscles, and ligaments around them. Definitely freaking hurts. I don't grind my teeth, though, so that didn't happen. I think I just, slept on it weird. It's weird. It's very annoying, but if it keeps going for days on end, I'm going to have to see my doctor about it, because it frickin' hurts. Basically, your joint there gets irritated, inflamed. Wonderful. Well, here's the best part. I'm not allowed to take ibuprofen, which is wonderful for inflamed stuff. But I might have to do a one-off. All right, we're going to do one more chapter. That's what I had a couple of months back. It sucked. Yeah. Okay. We're going to do one more chapter, and then we're going to raid out. So, thank you for being here. Thank you for sticking with it. I hope you've been enjoying the story as much as I have. Page 24, Chapter 3, Charlotte Sapori. I was up and dressed when Estelle knocked on my bedroom door the following morning. I had hardly slept, struggling to digest my parents' extraordinary story, annoyed with myself when Sherlock Holmes finally ended the call. I was barely able to speak during our conversation. There were so many unanswered questions. Was Nico also the offspring of the celebrated detective? And if so, then who was Luca Sapori? Where did he fit into the equation? This didn't make any sense. From what little I knew of Sherlock Holmes, he was an eccentric, solitary figure, a confirmed bachelor. He lived alone at his flat at Baker Street, his only companions, his housekeeper, and his friend and colleague, Dr. John Watson. I only knew this because my brother was an avid fan. He read all of Dr. Watson's chronicles, outlining Holmes's most famous cases. My God, how could I tell my brother he was most likely the son of the celebrated detective he hero worshipped? I decided not to say anything for now, not until I have garnered more information. I figured I had some investigating of my own to do. When Estelle and I arrived at the hospital, we entered Mother's room and were shocked to discover the bed was empty. The nurse ran over to speak to us. "We've been trying to contact you," she said. "Your mother suffered a stroke half an hour ago. She's in the operating theater." The nurse squeezed my hand. "The stroke was massive, so prepare yourself for the worst." Estelle and I were escorted to the waiting room. Someone brought us coffee, and we sat in stunned silence for over 2 hours, so grief-stricken we could barely speak. Eventually, the consultant entered the room, shaking his head. "I'm so sorry, Miss Sapori. We did everything we could, but the stroke caused too much damage, and we couldn't save her." Estelle and I collapsed into each other's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "May we see her?" I asked. The doctor nodded. "Yes, of course. Please give us time to prepare." We were eventually ushered into a side room next to the hospital mortuary, where my beautiful mother lay on a bed in the stillness of death. She looked so serene and peaceful. I kissed her on the cheek and held her hand, her body still warm. "I wish you told me," I whispered. "Told you what?" quizzed Estelle, staring at her through her tears. "It doesn't matter," I said. "In the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter at all." Had my pork chops smothered in leftover smashed potatoes? Ooh, yeah. That sounds good. We sat with Mother for an hour before slipping into the hospital chapel to light a candle to help guide my mother on her final journey to the afterlife, which she believed in so strongly. We eventually returned home. I was heartbroken. Not only had I lost my beloved mother, but the person I had known as my father had disappeared from my life. As far as I was concerned, I had lost both my parents within hours of each other. I had never felt so alone in my life. I wanted answers, and I was determined I would find them. It was the end of August before we could finally travel to Fiesole, Florence, where my father's friend Ludo and Violetta Esperato lived, with their son Francesco. Their daughter Ava, a celebrated soprano, arrived earlier from Milan with her husband Javier, and Robert, and Sophia Moon. Since first-year student at La Scala, Sophia had been my mother's best friend. The quartet of friends traveled together by train to help celebrate the life of a remarkable woman. Ludo and Violetta had very kindly invited us to stay with them for a few days until my mother's memorial service. Father was, by this time, feeling much better. Although he had been too ill to attend Neen's funeral in Trenton, he was determined not to miss the memorial service. So, despite his doctor's reservations, he traveled over by train from London. Nico and I slept in the barn conversion where our parents first stayed together over 30 years ago. Every night after dinner, we sat with Father on the patio, celebrating Mother's life with a toast of whiskey or wine, with either Beethoven or Wagner playing in the background. We came to regard those evenings as Sakrosankt. Sakrosankt. I can speak. Ava and Sophia opened the memorial service with an outstanding rendition of Neen's favorite hymn, Amazing Grace. Then the priest read Psalm 42. Afterwards, my father recited When You Are Old by William Butler Yeats. There wasn't a dry eye in the church after that. Finally, Sophia delivered a beautiful and touching eulogy, speaking eloquently about Neen and how much she meant to her as a friend. She recalled when they went out to dinner during their first year at La Scala. A young gentleman approached their table. He was barely 19. He introduced himself to Sophia and told her she was one of the finest opera singers he had ever heard. Sophia thanked him profusely, thrilled that someone had recognized her talent. Unfortunately, Sophia's joy was short-lived. After a few minutes, the man tentatively approached Sophia with a puzzled expression on his face. I am so sorry. I've mistaken you for someone else. I thought you were Irene Adler. After that humiliating experience, Sophia was, of course, mortified. And as for Neen, she couldn't stop laughing. The tale certainly got a chuckle from the congregation. Even the priest laughed. That young man was Arturo Toscanini, destined to be a lifelong friend and now principal conductor of the New York Philharmonic Orchestra in New York. Sophia addressed the congregation with good grace and a faint smile. She nodded before continuing with her narrative. That young man was right, of course. Who could ever forget that remarkable talent? Neen was my oldest and dearest friend. I'll never forget the first time we met on registration day at La Scala. I walked into the room and she stared at me, the girl with her magnificent violet eyes. I gazed up at her statuesque figure, lustrous auburn hair, beautiful, flawless porcelain skin and high cheekbones. This girl who adored Beethoven and Stephen Foster smiled at me as if I were a close friend she hadn't seen for years. We made a connection that day that never left us. We became inseparable. Neen's life was, of course, later consumed with a deep, abiding love she had for her family. Although mainly for her beloved husband, Luca, and her two exceptional children, Nico and Charlotte, she had great pride in her profession and captivated everyone around her. She was a fearless, fabulous force of nature with an inimitable voice. Richard Strauss once said that the human voice was the most beautiful instrument. I do believe that Neen was living proof of that testament. The combination of a personality, beauty, courage, and sheer emotional power all contributed to making her the brilliantly skilled contralto and performer she came to be. Neen was the best friend anyone could ever hope for, and I know I speak for everyone who's come here today to honor her memory. We will miss her beyond words. The loveliest light has gone out. Sophia looked upwards, smiling through silent tears. I love you, Neen. It was so special to have known you as a friend. May you rest in peace until we meet again. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a lovely ending to chapter 3. KD, what a special book you have written. It's absolutely fantastic. And I also give you credit for staying awake for as long as you have to come and listen. Please do not feel you have to do that every time we dive into your book. I will always record these streams and they will be available via YouTube so that you can listen back. Fantastic story. Absolutely fantastic. Well then, how do we do it? How do we do what? How do we do what? Let me find someone we can raid to. Because it's about that time. After this, I'm going to go do my my ab workout for the evening. Listen to a story if we're not here. Listen to it later. I can finally turn that off. Oh, there's my face. Thought so? Okay. Oh, my freaking jaw. Ow. All right. Let's see. My. There are a lot of people online. So many. That manly jaw, the scruff. That's me. I am definitely a man. I'm Batman. I'm vengeance. Oh boy. Gosh, sorry, I'm having a hard time deciding who we should go see. I know. We're going to go see some friends of mine. Thank you again, wonderful stuff. I would love you to read my new book, The Whistle of Revenge, book 4 of the series, and an exciting follow-up to The Hound of the Baskervilles. Interesting. Well, we'll have to see how long we go with your current book, Katie, and then we'll see. We shall absolutely see. Thank you, everyone, for being here this evening. So I'm just making sure I type this correct, because sometimes I don't do so good with the typies. We'll be back on Thursday, 6 Central, to continue this fantastic read. But until then, I wish you all the very best. As I always like to say, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and have an amazing night.